Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a wonderful Monday night. We are just John and I tonight.
Just the
So
two of us. Yeah.
I'm glad you sang it because if I did it, they would call the restraining order.
Yeah.
But no, in all seriousness, thank you so very much for taking time because tonight I think is one of those topics that we've touched on here and there. We've kind of like hinted at it a couple of times, but it seems to still be one of those hot topics, and I think it's definitely something that I'm glad John brought up and something that we can dive into a little deeper.
And that's going to be kind of the little part we're going to do tonight. Is that it is a deep dive into some areas here. So for those of you who are very fluent in construction and building, and you've built things before, tonight's show's probably not going to be for you. If you have never done much with wood, or you don't know where to start type of thing, tonight's going to be a show for you, because we're going to really get down into some of the basics of what it takes to be successful making things. And then Dan, of course, has made. So we're going to be able to talk to someone who has been there, done that. All I've ever built was houses. So I did build an amp case and a coffin back in the day when you had home CD player, mixer, and what did I? Oh, and a karaoke player on that side. So we had, all these different things, and then the two big garage door handles, or two sets of garage door handles on each end. So you had to pick it up, and it looked like we carried a dog coffin wherever we went. It was great fun.
Oh, absolutely.
And it was easily 60, 70 pounds. There's no way one person, because of the bulk of it and the weight of it, one person couldn't handle it. The good old days. How we miss those. Yeah, Danny's got the Craftsman toolbox ready. Danny, you get a gold star for tonight. I should have done this. This show should have been done on the other side, where I do have the Craftsman studio set up over there. That would have been pretty cool. That would have been pretty. I can't even bring a Craftsman tool. I'd have to go over. I don't have any of those even. Oh man, am I just so unprepared?
How are we supposed to talk about building stuff if you don't
have the
to,
tools?
Show it off.
Oh, that's just sad and pathetic. We'll get through. So first off, Dan, before you jumped into building your podium, let's talk about the research side. Where were you looking around for inspiration and ideas when you were going to be building something?
My gosh, it felt like it came from everywhere because I agonized over this for the longest time. I'm not a handyman in any way, shape, or form. But I didn't want to spend the money that was out there for building it, because I also didn't really necessarily find something that was what I'm wanting to do. So I reached out to like Lou Paris, because he kind of gave me some directions, because he's like, well, I have an ideas that I've been thinking about. And Logan Smith, DJ Low Stacks, had just come out with a video of his booth. At the time, it was like version 1, and he showed like a video of what he has, and I'm like, that started to be kind of along the idea of what I wanted to do. And so it was just like a little piece of this and a little piece of that. And then, there was a couple of other DJs, and I don't even remember who they are at this point, had posted some stuff on Facebook, and I was like, there's another idea. And so it was just one of those, like, a little bit of this idea, a little bit of that idea, and I slapped it together to be like, well, this is going to fit everything I'm looking for, the way that I'm looking for it. And then some.
So what were a couple of the things that you, for your situation, that you had to have in your podium booth?
So, well, keep in mind, this is my rolling. So this is the one with the TV on the front. A couple of things that were important to me. I was trying to make it something that I could roll in with all of my gear loaded on it at once. Is my 90% of the weddings I'm doing, I'm using the Evolve 50s. So they're small enough that I was like, okay, I want a spot that I can put the sub cabinets on there, someplace where I could put the top bags on. And then I also recognized that this was not going to go everywhere. I knew I was going to run into some things. So I also needed to have parts that were not permanently rack mounted, right?
Sure.
Like I didn't want something that was screwed in and I had to screw it out to go use it. I wanted a box that I could unhook a couple cables and take the box over and use it underneath a table or use it in another spot. I also didn't want to have to go out and buy, 5 different mic receivers just so I could have some for this system and some for that system. I wanted those pieces to be modular. I wanted them to kind of be take from here and go over to my other booth or to my other needs as they were available. So those were some of the things, as well as just keeping costs down. The TV became an idea after talking a little bit with Donnie Lewis, because he had a couple of his booths, and he's very, very handy like that as well. And he had talked about how, having the nice design on the front is cool. And then I went over and talked to somebody else, and they're like, yeah, but if you've got a TV, you've got all this real estate, it opens up the door for you to do a lot if
Mm-hmm.
you can put a TV there. And that, combined with the size that I was looking at to have the equipment and be able to use it as a cart, I quickly realized I might as well put a TV. I forget what the dimensions are at the time. It was before I actually built it, but I was getting up to like that 50, 55-inch wide
Mm-hmm.
space. And I'm like, if I just put something white, just a white wall, that's just going to look kind of plain and boring.
Sure.
So that's another piece. Like, it was like, okay, I want to put TV in there. And those ideas developed as I got closer to the actual build.
So now, when you were kind of starting it out, you remember the conversations back and forth where you were like, okay, if I build this out of 2x4s, this is going to get pretty intense really quick. So what direction did you decide to go, instead of building it completely out of wood?
So this one I definitely took from Low Stacks. Basically, his booth was aluminum, and he, aluminum welded pieces together. I had a couple other people who recommended 80/20, but I didn't have any familiarity really with working with that or creating it. Where I felt if I took this design to a fabrication shop, they could weld it together for me.
Sure.
So I ended up, I forget the width on mine, if it's 2 inches, I think, for the aluminum squares. But it's a decent size. It
Mm-hmm.
was something that was then recommended to me. They're like, listen, we could go, I think it was two. They're like, we can go 1.5, but you're not going to save much. You might as well just go two to give us that extra strength.
A little bit more
So I went
stability.
with aluminum again, just to keep it as light as possible, um, for the main frame.
And for tonight's show, we're not going to dig into working with metal. Metal is something that you have to have a specialty person, especially doing aluminum. You need to have someone who knows what they're doing. You don't learn welding on aluminum. Not even close. So we'll leave that part alone with tonight's discussion. Although there are times where, especially when it came to the weight of Dan's rolling case, it was required for that size of a unit.
Yeah. And I would definitely recommend that, after we go through tonight, if you're like, that's the direction that I might want to go, is working with aluminum, especially if you don't, there's a lot of fabricators out there that will do this for you. Um, and really in the end, it's going to save you a lot of time and headache. And that weight that you're going to be able to take off, I think is key.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth it to spend the money for somebody to fabricate it, because in the grand scheme of things, I mean, it probably was half the cost that I had into it, was having this welded. But I also know that there was, like, it was done right.
To get them the plan for this, what did they need from you? Did you have to go and sketch things out and give them a blueprint with exact dimensions, or was it something that they took the picture that you had kind of sketched out, and then they came up with what they needed for dimensions?
So I went to two different places. The initial one that I went to was one locally here in town, and I had some rough sketches of what I wanted. And I did have certain dimensions that I wanted to make sure I included, because of what I was using on that bottom rack, with the two subs side by
Mm-hmm.
side, and the other, and the audio rack that was all in there. I knew that the space inside had to be X dimensions. So I gave that to them. I also knew that if I was going to have it, if I was going to be able to fit it, fit the subs and vertically, how much I needed there. So a lot of those dimensions came because of the equipment that I was putting and what I knew I wanted to put in there. And then beyond that, it really kind of helped almost everything from that shape itself.
Okay.
I padded a couple inches on either side, both width-wise as well as depth, as well as height, just to give me some wiggle room to play with in case my mental piece was off. And they started to take something, but before I even went too far with the company, I reached out to a couple of mine actually, I shouldn't say I reached out. I mentioned something on Facebook, and the bride who was a friend with me reached out to me, and she was just like, "Hey," she's like, "This is what Ryan does."
Mm,
I was like, "Really?" She's like, "He'd be willing to do this for you. Like he'd be willing, and he's,
yeah.
pay obviously, but he'd be willing to, to let you hire
Take
him and do this for you." And so that was able to just basically take in the directions, and there was slight modifications once we got into it, but he then took it from there.
So Ryan went and put the frame together, and you were ready to roll. Then you needed to get it back and wrap it, in essence, to kind of finish it off. What kind of materials did you decide to use then for that part of the aspect?
I wanted the aluminum piece was nice because once that was on, like we could lift it. Now the bottom flat piece of aluminum was probably the heaviest part
Hmm.
of the whole thing. But it was something that two people could easily just pick this up and put it on the table. Like that was the nice thing. So I knew when I started adding other pieces to it, I wanted to keep it as light as possible. But if it's a shelf that I'm going to put equipment on, or it's a shelf that I'm going to, put my controller on and computer and start attaching things and running wires, I wanted to make sure that there was some stability there so it didn't like start to sag.
Yes.
So I went with um oh my gosh, I'm blanking with the type of plywood that's coated in like the white.
Melamine.
Thank you. Thank you. So I went with that for my top shelf. Because that was also going to be in the eye of the public, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted that to be as nice as possible. The next shelf down, I just went with some nice plywood that was thick enough. I maybe quarter of an inch, half of an inch, just enough to kind of add that strength there. And then my sides, I went with plywood. Again, went as light as I possibly could. Initially, I was going to put flooring. I was gonna try and do like I was gonna try and get like the stick together flooring
Okay.
and
Mm-hmm.
have it like attached to the side. And I just couldn't get that in the way that I wanted it or the
Sure.
way that I thought I could work with it. So that's why I went to the plywood and then went to Lowe's and got the stuff where you peel it off, like the
Peel
peel
and
and
stick.
stick
Yep.
flooring.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my siding. And so that became my siding. And attaching everything with obviously with some screws to make sure that it holds as best I can. Um, and then the trim, I did MDF. Like it's the type of stuff that if somebody decided to take it with a knife and go, it would like splinter in like 8,000 pieces.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I went. But by doing that, it was an area that really wasn't going to be used. And I wanted something that if it did break, it could come apart really easy. It's cheap and it's wicked light. I mean, it's like pinky finger,
Yeah.
is holding up the big long sheet. So that's my main purpose with anything else that I added was keeping it as light as possible, and I don't want to say as cheap as possible, but as cost effective as possible.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Excellent. You've gotten us in a good position now to talk about stuff, but I think that, oh yeah, plywood. That's where we'll start. So Dan used a couple of he talked about using plywood, MDF in that. So we're going to go through some of the different components that you could use when you're building. Now again, we're not going to get into the metal side of things. Maybe when we talk screws, we'll talk for just a second about that. But we're not going to get into that because that's something that if you need that, you've got to find someone who can do that. That's a little beyond the average kind of DIYer. Unfortunately or fortunately, some of our friends have that ability and would jump into it, and they might do a great job. Aluminum is very unforgiving when it comes to that. So Dan, if you've got
It's not entirely cheap either.
yeah,
so,
exactly.
I mean,
So if you mess it up, it's you can recycle it. So let's go with that. You can recycle.
you had me bring up these pictures. Do you want us to share
Yep,
anything?
let's do
real quick
the
with
the plywood
Okay.
one with the from the Civic Concept. By the way, there's 3 links in the comments in the description of this video tonight that are going to talk about some of the stuff. Okay, so that we can't do that. Hang on for those of you. For those of you who are exit full screen. We've got a
The
different
X is full
computer.
screen?
No, you're good. You're good. It's just
Oh,
it was on my side. Got a different computer tonight than in the main one, and then it's not set up yet, so it decided to go full screen, and which means no one out there could see what you were sharing.
okay.
So, let's see. Okay. Yeah, I think we're pretty close here. Trying to get it so it fits a little bit better here in the window. Okay, so what we have in this little picture there, especially on the left side, is we're looking at a variety of different types. Can you make that a little smaller, Dan, on your side? I'm going to look at the left side of that image where it has the different plywood. We talked about plywood and the MDF and such. There we go.
Did I click on it?
There we go. Nope.
There?
That's what we want to
Okay.
see. Yep. So you're seeing a variety of different. There's different types of plywood in this image, and some are referred to as plywood, kind of as a generic category. Plywood can be the top two would be considered true plywood, where it is different plies of wood that can sometimes be pieces of wood that have been kind of peeled off a trunk, and then they flattened and they will be glued. Sometimes they're glued in different directions. Most of the time they're glued in different directions, but like the very top one, you've got a pretty side, and then you've got your middle, and then you've got another pretty side, as just to give it a kind of a quick little idea what those are. Some plywoods will have one very nice side and one not so nice side. Construction plywood, they don't really care. You'll see knots and different things. And then there's going to be finer plywoods like birch plywood. That would be, instead of saying 3 or 5 ply, you may get to 11 ply in about a 5/8 inch, where they're very, very thin ply. The thinner plies are very important when you're trying to build something like furniture or gear cases, because that thin is going to give you less chance of flex when you're out using it. It's going to be more rigid and more a little stronger. Birch plywood on the outside, if the birch on the outside, is going to typically give you something that you can paint a lot easier. There's oak plywood, there's many hardwoods that are out there. Some of those things don't paint very well. You have to go and treat them first before you can paint them, and there's no advantage to it. Most of your speaker cabinets, if you kind of read in it, if it's a wood cabinet, it'll talk about that it's using birch plywood, because that's kind of a very common thing to be making your gear out of. As you continue down, Dan used the phrase MDF, and you can see down a little bit, there's an MDF. And MDF, many things get thrown into that. I'm also going to show a little piece here. It can be a variety of widths, and typically an MDF that you're going to be seeing like if you go to Home Depot or somewhere, is going to be something that has the nicer sides. You know, the sides are all pretty, and then you've got this kind of core in the middle that is basically glued sawdust, chips and sawdust, which is kind of shown on that picture a little bit. That's an MDF. It's a medium density fiberboard is what it is. And they can do quite a bit, but the problem with those is that because it's a sawdust center, they don't do well if they're going to be in a high moisture area. Plywoods will do a little bit better, but there are high moisture types of boards that would work better in a wet condition. There's also a high-density fiberboard, an HDF, which is used in some applications. Really, in anything we would do, we probably really wouldn't look at that. Dan, can you slide down a little bit below that MDF? And then you get down into the particle board. Now, the particle board is typically something that people will use in different applications, like say the bottom shelf of a cabinet sometimes are particle board, or they're using it for the back of a cabinet or something to that effect. It really wouldn't be something you'd want to use in anything we were going to do, because it's strictly just glued sawdust on that, and it wouldn't work out well for where we're at or what we're wanting to do. So, how come it's so difficult to control for you, Dan?
Well, I'm not able to move it at all because it's an image, and on mine,
Okay.
like I got a huge black border around mine that's apparently not coming through on your end.
Yeah. Well, it is. We've got the black on the side, but yeah, that's just weird. Usually we can scroll those around pretty well. So, well, let's
usually if there's other stuff to see. But.
Yeah, no, that's so. So there's a variety of different things, but the biggest thing to keep in mind is that if you're going to be doing something, and if you want to paint it, you're going to need to have a birch or a side maple can be painted pretty well. Ash can be painted. Popple can be painted very, very well. You need to have a plywood that has a face that can be painted and take paint well. If not, it's going to take multiple steps to get it to take paint. Mahogany doesn't take paint very well. Oak doesn't, and any others. So that's the birch is what you want to look at. Let's jump to the next one and talk a little bit about some joint, to be able to connect these pieces of wood. If you're building cabinets or drawers, that one's not doing much better. That's huge.
I wonder if it's somehow on your end, because I'm sure in the entire window, and you're apparently only seeing a very small portion.
Well,
of
no,
that window.
it's like typical with you and I in a corner, and then it's zoomed way in.
Yeah, I'm not on my end. That's what I'm saying. Like I'm seeing the entire page.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it now in the YouTube video what you're talking about.
Oh, hey, okay, it was on my end. There we go. I'm sorry. Yeah, again, I'm sorry for those of you watching. We're figuring out the new settings on the latest. Okay, so now I'm seeing the whole window as we should be. If you want to go scroll us down to that, and this is this link or these pictures are taken from a book on Amazon about building boxes and things. It's in that description below. It's if you want to get into doing some wood projects. It's a great little book that has a lot of information about how you do these things and what these things are, and specifically, in this case, talking about joints for boxes and drawers. So take us down a little farther there, Dan, if you would, please. And as you can see, it's talking about a lot of different frame methods of connecting wood, and many of these you'll see on some of this old house type of things, and they're talking about turn of the century furniture. And we're just about a little bit farther there. There we go. I want to just stop right there. So there's a lot of different connections or way to connect boards for making those corners in the boxes or cases. You've got in the number 31 right there, you've got a square-ended butt joint, where basically one board butts into the other. And sometimes you would glue it and either put nails in it for something that's not going to be structurally needing a lot of security. Some people would use screws in that one. If you want to take it a step up and make it a little bit more of a durable joint, and then you go over to 32 with a mitered butt joint, where the two of them are you cut them at a 45 and then get that. And again, in that case, you'd probably use either a finishing nail or a finishing screw to hold those two together. And as you continue through, there's just a lot of different ways of connecting two pieces of wood in this area. You're getting into dovetails and finger joints and different things such as that. Most of those are going to be probably beyond, except number 40. Number 40 would be kind of an important joint right there, the butt rub joint, which sounds like something you would do to your chicken before you cook it. But no, it's not. It's not. That would actually be in Dan's case when he was building his rolling case, and he wanted to make it so that bottom shelf could handle some weight and not be kind of collapsing down. If he didn't use the aluminum, he could use a joint like that where he would have the sides and then have that little kind of that little rub joint is what's basically that little block in there to help support that bottom shelf. That would be installed under, and it could be literally installed on both sides in the front, and that would help to support that shelf that would be handling those subs. Unfortunately, because it's wood, it would still probably sag without something to support the part closest to Dan, whether that's using a board under there or whatever. But that would help tremendously to keep it from basically breaking on the sides where where it would like be screwed into the side panels. So there's a lot of good information there if you guys want to check that book out when it comes to that. Some of those joints are very difficult to do, and there are some of them I wouldn't even attempt myself, and I've done quite a few of those off and on with different projects. With the biscuit cuts, those I've done. The doweling is always kind of neat. The spline miter, I've done some things with that, but there's some of them that are truly a craftsman who is patient and has the right tools. Yeah, that's where some of them are needed.
I feel like you're not talking to me on that one, John.
There's many of these as I'm looking at it. It's like, man, I've done those. I don't know if I could do some of those again, even though I have better tools today than I did then. But it was one of those things that it just took so much time. When you get into doing mitered dovetail, you've got to have those things all planned out, and you've got to be able to, lay those out, and you're going to be cutting and doing the things, and you got the chisel to clean out there's a lot of putsy work to that to get them to fit and fit well. And I just don't I don't think I could do it right now, or I probably eventually I'd have to probably practice on a couple of them. So, all right, let's jump to the next one. I want to hit a little bit on screws. There's a lot of different screws and different things you can use, and this is going to have this little page. I was trying to find one that just literally had wood screws, and you really don't find those. The top are kind of more of a metal screw, which in Dan's case, some of those might have been needed with what he did to be able to attach to his aluminum. Now, if you take a look, compare that top row to the center row. Some of those screws, specifically if you look at the Phillips panhead particle board screw in the middle, that's kind of like in the middle to the middle right of the middle row, and then you look up to the panhead self-tapping screw above there, you can see that there's a little bit of difference between the two. Obviously color, but we're not there. They can be very similar in size, but the difference between them is the way the threads are when you're dealing with metal and when you're dealing with wood. The wood is going to be a more elongated thread typically, and it's going to be one that will be a thinner thread, and it's not really designed to try to drill and self-tap into wood, even though it's got a sharp point on it, or into the metal. It has a sharp point on it like you would think that would go into metal, but they're just not as strong enough to be able to use consistently in metal. Whereas the self-tapping one up above, that silver one, will be able to get in that, and it has those aggressive threads that are just bigger and stronger that will be able to go into that metal and stay and hold and not collapse as the metal, that they basically grind away. And that's the biggest difference you're going to have between the metal and the wood screws is the strength of those threads, because you don't need to have super strong threads when you're going into wood. Looking on the very left of that middle row, you've got the Phillips drive, where you'll see that there's part of the shaft is not, the shank there is not threaded, and then you get into the threaded part. That is a screw that would be used if you were going to be putting two pieces of wood together, making that joint, and you were going to be coming through this piece of wood into that one, and you really didn't want to have any of the threads into this screw, because you want to be able to go and have the threads getting into this wood. No threads in this wood. You want the screw to go through this wood, and then when it hits that shaft, it's going to be able to turn in this board, and then the threads are going to all be inside this board to suck it in nice and tight. That's why in the wood situation, you'll see many of them that have that, where the shank is, about 3/4 inch, and it's not, doesn't have threads on it. And you'll see that with the first four are all that way. The big difference why you don't see it on the latter part is, with drywall, it's a little bit, the last two are drywall screws, in essence, of what you would call those. It's not as important in drywall to have an open shank like that, so that's why they don't bother with it. But for wood, where you're attaching one by to something else, that is very common. And you can get those where it's meant for a 2x4 also, and you get a 4-inch screw, it's got an 1.5 inch space in there, so that after it's gone through the board, it can spin freely and suck into the next board to pull it in nice and tight. The trim head screw that's in there about right in the middle of that second row, they make a version of that is a decking screw that can be used in some of our applications. Now, the version that's a decking screw has the thread, and it'll have a little space in there that's kind of a smooth, where there aren't any threads, and then there will be a different thread at the very end. So you've got the part that goes into the next board, and then there's a last little bit of thread that will go and catch the current board. And the two threads, if you look at them very carefully, and some screws some companies make, they will be slightly different, so that the screw goes into the bigger board, and it'll start to suck into that, and it'll catch strongly into the board you went through, and that helps to pull the two together, but it doesn't, it'll allow it to spin a little bit freer, but it'll get in there, catch it, and then suck everything together. Whereas the one that we're looking at, the trim head screw, the only thing that would be catching in that board would the board that would be here, the only thing it'd be catching is the head. There's nothing to catch the extra wood. So there's times where those trim head screws, I have had some of those, I pretty much have thrown those away, or they just aren't used, because I've gone to those finishing screws. They have a T15 head, so that's a tiny little torque head. And those work in so many applications. And I like the way they suck in, and yet they hold both pieces of wood very, very well. And in the bottom, we just have a variety of different, some other screws that are used in metal applications, more self-tapping stuff and such. Okay, what are we up to next? Oh, anchors. So occasionally, when you're doing something and you end up with a hole that gets reamed out, there's a variety of different things you can use, and the tops are masonry anchors, basically cement anchors. So we're really not going to waste too much time. But I wanted to come down into that third row where we have some plastic. Some of these, the very first one is made for more of a hollow core door. Some people can use those. You can use those in sheetrock. The third one in there, the conical anchors, are the ones that might be used in some of your applications. If you have a hole that you've reamed out and you want to try to do something with it, sometimes a plastic anchor like that can allow you to do something. The key with any of these anchors is that we're using in wood is that they're never as strong as reamed out wood. What it should have been. So when it comes to an anchor, use it at your own risk, and it's more to a point with many of the anchors. It's more something that if it's not a strength area, you'd probably be okay using an anchor and putting a screw in there. But if it's something that you need to have real strength, you might be better off doing something completely different, like taking a 1/2-inch drill, drilling that out, and gluing a dowel in there. That will allow you to run a screw back in there once that's all the glue is set and you've shaped it to it's flat again. Drilling that new screw into a dowel, a 1/2-inch dowel, will work, where some anchors won't sometimes. I think that was it for pictures, isn't it?
Unless you wanted me to show anything from the booth.
Yep. So now that's where I want to head next. So I want to make sure that my stuff was done. So now we're going to jump in. Dan's got some pictures of what he did, and we're going to kind of wrap up, spend the last part of our show tonight, kind of looking at some of his things. And if you guys have got any questions about what Dan has done, we'll handle those as we're rolling through here, so we wrap things up. We've got a nice crowd watching tonight. Thank you guys for being with us.
The way I'm sharing is different. Hang on.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, that's right, Aaron. We're screwing around tonight. Yes, that's what we're doing.
Can't get my share settings. All right, we're just gonna pull them into the window then.
Did I?
You messed me up. That's what you did. You messed me up.
Well, let me see. Did I? I can stop your sharing.
Yeah, stop my sharing for a second, and then I can reshare.
Okay.
I'll fix it.
Let's see if we do.
Okay. Now they came back.
There we go.
Somehow they got moved.
Yeah, and it's hard to say. We're still working our way through figuring this stuff out. 'Cause I had a window I had to pop open. Okay.
So this was the initial frame with the TV put on. So this was none of my doing outside of some dimensions and some extra kind of like 2 cents that I gave him.
Mm-hmm.
As we were going. So that was kind of the first one. I'll give it another viewpoint from it. So
let's talk a little bit about
sure.
the wheels. You get a better shot of the wheels there. Where did you and why did you pick those wheels? Where'd you get them from and why did you pick them?
The fabricator picked them out, and
Yep.
I wanted large enough wheels that I wasn't going to have trouble going through most surfaces.
Sure.
They're hard, they're plastic. They're white in the center, so that way, because I wasn't building something on the bottom, when I get into place at a venue, I actually turn the wheels to the middle. They're locking, all 4 of them lock.
Nice.
And so I have the white showing to the crowd. So they see wheels, but they look nice because they kind of fit with the overall look of the booth. But there's just 4. Hindsight with the size of this booth, I almost think I should have done a 5th one or had him done a 5th one in the middle to give me that extra little bit of just support, especially like going in and out of a trailer. You're going up, you're going in, just to give me that extra, even if it was just a smaller one to kind of balance that piece in the middle, I think would have helped.
Sure, it
Because
kept
there's
you
been
from.
once or twice those ones on the end have gotten caught,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like trying to get them out without losing control of the booth is tricky.
Good. Yeah, it's a good thought. Were you concerned about center of gravity? And I see because you've got a big sheet of aluminum there at the bottom. But did you put any thought into where that center of gravity was going to be and tippiness?
Not no, because of the size of it.
Okay.
I knew first off, moving it was going to have the subs on the bottom. It was going to have all the weight was going to be on the bottom, even without that big sheet in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew there was no issues there. It's super deep. Like hindsight, this thing, I made it so that it could go through any standard ADA approved door. But I only gave myself like an inch clearance on either
Hmm.
side. So hindsight, should have probably found a way to make that even more narrow.
Sure.
But no, I did no issues, no issues worried about tipping. To be honest with you, a lot of the things I think I got lucky on. There were things that I didn't think about, such as that too much. Because I just kind of assumed like I'm going to have most of the weight in the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
When I don't, it's not going anywhere, so I don't have to worry about it tipping. And the only things that we're going to be up top were going to be the TV, which is light. It's an LED, and then the melamine board with a couple things on top. It was
Mm-hmm.
definitely going to be heavier on the bottom.
Sure. Excellent.
So this was actually, I want to say almost version 1 of the booth. So I had him, everything was built. He actually came up with this idea of a way for us to attach the TV with
Sure.
this extra square. Thought that was a great idea. I know, and I mentioned low stacks earlier. He just basically butted up the TV between whatever's in front of it holding the TV and whatever's behind it. It's not even really secured in there in
Mm.
his. It just fits almost like wedged in there. I wanted to attach my original plan was that the top of the booth was going to stick out in front of the TV enough so that I could put like a whiteboard down there if I didn't want the TV. Almost just like poster board,
Oh
not
yeah,
really
yeah,
poster
yeah.
board,
Mm-hmm.
but
Covered up.
something super thin and small or to be able to just pop the TV out. Like if I have a problem with the TV, like ideally when it came down to it, I just never was able to make that work
Hmm.
in the design. But that was the piece. But what I ended up doing is took it back to him and I added an extra bar. And I don't know if I had that on a future picture or if it's going to be covered, but I added an extra bar right in the sides where I wanted the handles to screw into,
Oh, sure. Yep.
because I didn't want to be moving around holding the booth. I wanted handles on it.
Yeah.
And even if I had to like lift it up or pick it up, I wanted the handles screwed into aluminum.
Yeah,
And
for
so
sure.
that's what I ended up doing with it.
Mm-hmm. Good idea.
So this is just the front side with the TV mounted. This is where I started to put some of those pieces on. So
Yeah.
this is the melamine at the top, and then again just that thin plywood on the bottom. You'll notice it back in the there we go. No, we go to the first one. That crossbar was the main piece, but everything else kind of sits. So this gave support in the middle, so I didn't have to worry about any sag. I mean, with the
Yeah.
melamine, I wouldn't have anyway. But on the bottom, which is the plywood, I didn't want that sagging, so I had him add these extra bars in, so it was
Yeah. Good idea.
sitting
Yeah.
around all 4 pieces. And then this was putting that side on. Like I said, I wanted to have that was that plywood. Um, I put wood glue and then screwed it like insane, and then just used clamps to make sure it kind of all held together. Then I added, I wanted to have protection for the TV. So this was probably the most expensive piece outside of the construction of the aluminum.
Hmm.
Was my I'm blanking on the name of it. The
The plexiglass.
glass. Thank you. Yes, I was just blanking. Plexiglass. But I had to get, so there was a couple things. Both the melamine and the plexiglass, I had to get much larger than what I needed because they didn't make a size like that. So I was
Ah,
paying for a lot of
waste.
wastedness.
Yeah.
Where if I kind of had pieced my parts first, I probably could have gone narrower, still fit everything,
Hmm.
and used a smaller piece of melamine. The plexiglass, probably not so much, but maybe I would have had some wiggle room there. But yeah, that was one piece. And then that peel and stick flooring.
Nice. That looks good.
So it made it good, and it gave me room for the trimmer on the sides. And then there you have it all put together. And I was wrong. I said MDF. I think it was more of a PVC
Yeah, that looks
for
like
the trim.
PVC, the trim board. Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
again, that's still
So
it can dent really easy, but
mhm,
it's inexpensive and easily replaced.
exactly. And I've had to do that already
Yeah.
because when I was first putting into the trailer, I didn't have all the correct tie downs and everything that I needed to have, and found that as it went riding down the road and the vibrations, what I did have didn't hold. And I went for a ride in my trailer one day. Um, and just smashed all of that PVC stuff all right up.
Yeah.
Um, and then this you can kind of see. So I painted the piece down here. I ended up coming along later and adding that peel and stick flooring to this
Sure.
shelf because it was just rough
Yeah,
and the
very rough.
bags were like catching on it.
Yep.
So it was a nice way to just kind of smooth it out. And if anybody saw it from that side, it really cleaned it up
Yeah. No, it
because that
looks
now
good.
it has that peel and stick piece on that side as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's just with the TV running.
Yep.
I ended up putting that peel stick on the bottom too because I ended up having some wasted space.
Yeah.
So I tried to figure out, okay, what do I do? Do I make it solid? And it was just one day I got, oh, if I do that,
Mm-hmm.
that'll fill it in as well. So
You mentioned wood glue, and that was something I forgot to talk about. There's a lot of different wood things out there for gluing, and there's two types of in Dan's situation. There's going to be joints that needed wood on wood, and there's a link in the description below. Type Bond, it's Type Bond. Their Series 3 is probably one of the best wood glues out there. I've used a lot of wood glues over the time. There's Gorilla Glue and whatever. I've had really good luck with the Type Bond. That's my personal favorite. And then, Dan, you mentioned the peel and stick. Have you had problems with the peel and stick coming off a little bit?
I have. So what I kind of lucked out was because of how I stuck it on and because of the trim, it tends to stick.
Mm.
But during the hottest summer months, the board elongates, right? That peel and stick elongates, I guess, because it'll like
Expand it.
bubble
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
and I have to like push it down and stick it on. So I like the peel and stick, but I also recognize that if I go to a new version, I might have to do something else to make that hold better.
And the glue that you need is called, it would be an epoxy, where it's basically a two-part glue. If you guys have ever played with epoxy, it can be very nasty stuff, but it would be the only thing that would allow you to stick flooring on there, and it will not come off once it's there, which is good. And it could be bad if you don't get it on straight the first time. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to be doing something like that, epoxy, well, tough to work with, is permanent, for surely permanent. The wood glues and such are good for the right application, but the in what Dan's doing there with the peel and stick, or putting that flooring on, you would need an epoxy to be a permanent hold. But the
John, why didn't you tell me this back when I was building this booth?
I didn't think about it. We didn't do this show. It's just like, wait, in 4 years we'll do this show, and then it will cover everything.
There you go. There you go.
So yeah, I mean, looking back on it now, since you've had that booth, now you have purchased additional units. As far as so, what was the reason from going from building one to purchasing?
Because I think my wife and I would have gotten a divorce had I done this a second time. Um, no, in all seriousness, um, so this definitely fits the purpose of what I use, and I absolutely love the booth for majority of my events because it's easy to roll in. It's a little tricky sometimes getting it in and out of the trailer, especially if it's fully loaded, but I've gotten to the point I can do it. However, there's some venues that I go to that I just cannot do this rolling booth. I've got a hotel that the elevator is too narrow. I've got another hotel that possibly could fit, but you have to go in real tight and turn, and I don't think it would fit that. I don't think I could make that turn with it. Another one, I'm on a stage that's a foot high. So like I can pick this thing up and I can get it about to 10 and a half inches, but that extra inch and a half it just doesn't
You
want to
can't do it
go.
there. Yeah.
And so for reasons like that, I wanted to have something else. And um, I I realize in a way I built this booth, but my thought to this is I really didn't do a lot of the build part. I did
Mm,
more of, you know, additions, adding things onto it, things that were a little bit more in my wheelhouse. To build a thing from scratch, I think I just would have struggled. And I was liking Danny Max had put out his set of boosts, and when he came out with the Edge, I jumped on it. That was one of the things I jumped at right away. In fact, I think I was the first one to have one that wasn't bought as a demo unit. Jared, he still beat me to that one, but but no, I liked it. I liked what he had. I liked what it was doing. I like the simplicity of putting it together, and I needed something for those places that I could not take the rolling booth
right.
to.
Yeah.
And that's ideally what led me to that.
And I think that's one of the takeaways from this process is that we're going to build some things, and some things are going to work for a period of time, and maybe a season and a type of events and things you do. It's not bad to build something. It's kind of cool to do, but for most of the people who have built something, then they look back or they're like, yeah, I'm not going to do it again. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's some people who are really talented, and like Paul mentions, damn it, Jim, I'm a DJ, not a carpenter. There's a level of that, that something that would take a cabinetry person, 2 days to knock out and have a great well-built thing, and it takes us a month and a half, and that's just the way it is because we don't do this all the time. But ask that cabinet guy to put together a playlist that's going to keep the dance floor rocking.
Well, and you mentioned people that are good at it, and one of the people that I reached out to quite a bit was Donnie Lewis up in New York. Many of you know him for his mapping skills that you've seen him at trade shows and whatever, but he has built, like, all of his are built,
Mm-hmm.
and he builds it out of wood. And he even admits they're heavy,
Yeah.
like they're rolling in, but they look gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
And every once in a while he'll get a new idea, and next thing you know, he's coming out with new furniture for
Yeah.
himself. So, if you have the desire to learn, it's a great thing to do. Like, I'm very proud of what I have. And it
Mm-hmm.
was one of those things, like, especially in the beginning, when I was first running into photographers or different people that would, like, see it for the first time, they'd like, where'd you get that? And I
Yeah.
can actually go, it was my COVID project,
Yeah. It's like,
because
you're
that's when
done.
it happened. Like, I built majority of it during lockdown, putting it together and piecing it together. So, or in the time that followed it, I guess I should say. But it isn't for everybody. No matter what you have, it's not going to be for everybody. So you got to find what's going to be best for you. And does it make more sense to build that or buy it?
Mm-hmm.
I've had this conversation with my cousin lately. He saw my booth and he wanted to have one for himself. And I'm like, listen, you can do that. Or there's a couple that, he's like, well, I don't need one that's going to haul the equipment, and I don't need this. I'm like, you're describing something that's already on the market.
It's
You'd
good.
be better off to just go buy it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
I wanted something that was going to haul equipment until I started doing it and realized it didn't need to.
Mm-hmm.
And I've toyed around with version 2.0 of this and what that might look like, maybe in 5 years.
Yeah. Let the house get back to normal after the first build. Buddy.
Exactly.
Thank you guys for being with us and watching tonight. Up next here in about 10 minutes now, Hanging with Howie is going to be in the chill room, djntv.com/chill. You guys can jump out there and hang out with Howie. The link is going to be in the chat here, and so you can hit that. And then let's see. Tomorrow night we've got Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe. We are talking about what tomorrow night? Oh, come on now. There was something. Oh, tomorrow night we've done this show, a version of the show, a couple of times, and we haven't done one in the last year and a half, 2 years. We're gonna go and cover Ben's favorite apps tomorrow night on the Tuesday Night with Ben show, Ben Stowe show, which is going to be at 9:00 Eastern, and then 10:00 Eastern. There will be back in the chill room with Howie and Jay and Brian. Of course, I think Jay might. I'm not sure if he's at a trade show this week, but anyway, they do the Tuesday night music show. John is in there, John Cawley, and they do the record roundup, and then they talk music and DJ stuff, and it's gets to be kind of a fun time. So that'll be tomorrow night at 10:00, where they do the recording out at djntv.com/chill. And then Dan and I both got a couple of videos that'll hit in the morning, and you can look at those and laugh and say, wow, these guys are just as silly during the morning as they are in the evening. At least that's what my son says.
It's because we don't have the coffee yet.
That's true. That is true. I mean, 6 in the morning, that's early for us, even though we're old guys, and old guys get up early. But, it's another story. All right, Dan, take us home.
Sure thing. Everybody, thank you very much for taking time to join us tonight. Hopefully you learned some things, and if not, definitely check out the links that John shared, because there's a wealth of information out there. And sometimes the greatest pride you can have is in something that you've created with your own 2 hands. So check them out, see if it's for you. And if so, I'd love to see the projects that you create. Make sure you're checking out Hanging with Howie. Have yourself a good one. We'll see you next time.
Good night, everybody.